What's a rule in your house growing up that you thought was normal but turned out to be very strange? Story 1. Don't feed friends. If friends came over after school, we weren't allowed to offer them snacks or drinks. My parents didn't want them to eat all our food. As an adult, I feed everyone. I offered food to my kids' friends. I find it so weird that my parents were so stingy. We weren't broke. Growing up, we were well off. I never minded feeding the kids who came over. Story 2. Not my house, but at a friend's. I slept over at a friend's house once in elementary school, and during dinner, no one was allowed to drink anything. The mom's reasoning was that by filling your stomach with water, you would be too full and cause you to not finish your meal. After everyone cleaned their plate, required by the parents to not waste anything, everyone got up and went to the refrigerator to get a can of Coke. I asked for a glass to get some water and was given a rolled eye look from her mother. Story 3. When I was a kid, the rule in the car was that the driver picks the music. When I turned 16 and started driving, it became owner of the car picks the music. When I got my own car, it became most experienced driver in the car picks the music. Basically, my mom just changed the rules at random so that nobody could listen to music except her. Story 4. If there's 4 of you living in the house and a box of cakes/sweets/yogurt/whatever comes in a number divisible by that number, you stop eating when you reach that share. If there are additional or an unequal number, you leave the extras for whoever enjoys that particular thing the most. But if you suddenly crave it, no one gets mad. First come, first server, but preference for global enjoyment over personal. About 12 years ago, I moved in with my partner and their 10-year-old daughter. I am a save it for when I most want it kind of person. They are both eat it as soon as it's available kind of people. They had never heard of this. What I thought of as an unwritten and unbreakable rule was totally alien to them. The number of times I have bought a pack of something, gone to eat it a few days later, only to find that all of them, including mine, had already been eaten. After a while, they accustomed to my expectations. Sometimes they would forget how many they had already had, which is understandable. I realized not everyone was raised like me, but sometimes they would get so frustrated that I would leave the chocolate bar or whatever there for days, weeks without eating it. I remember during her teenage years, the daughter would sometimes march into my room with the chocolate and demand I eat it because she was sick of looking at it. Often my partner will eat the thing I've been saving, then replace it, sometimes 2, 3 times before I get around to eating it. Luckily, we are all, well, teenage hormones aside, very patient, respectful, and understanding people, so there's never any bad blood or ill feelings. All frustrations are usually vented through humor. Story 5. You can only eat certain things at certain times, like chips only on Fridays after 8 or only fries on Saturday. Only pizza for birthdays. Cookie time at 3. I followed these rules until mid-20s. I figured out that I'm an adult now, so I can eat whatever and whenever I want. It felt really wrong to just grab some chips on other days for a long time. Story 6. You can't eat unless an adult made the food and gave you permission to eat it. Didn't get that permission often, as there wasn't a present conscious adult around to ask most of the time. I mainly ate at school. We also had plenty of food at home, so it wasn't as though we were impoverished and starving. I remember one time my mom snuck up behind me and shattered a decorative bowl over my head because she caught me, half-starved, eating shredded cheese out of the bag in the middle of the night. I was 13 at the time and just hit a growth spurt. The first time I was at a friend's house and saw him just make a box of mac for us, I was panicking because he hadn't asked for or received permission to eat. He was confused, to say the least. Story 7. When I stay at my grandparents', my grandfather will not go to sleep until he knows that everybody in the house is asleep. One time I woke up to use the bathroom. Keep in mind it's 3 or 4 in the morning. As I'm walking out, he comes out of nowhere and goes, "What are you doing awake?" He got pretty mad. I never understood this, but I won't ask him why. Story 8. Reading these rules makes me feel like I was in the most normal house. We didn't have any rules beyond "don't touch what's not yours," referring to the sibling stuff mainly, without asking and be respectful. That's pretty much it. We could eat whatever. We could eat at the TV or at the table as long as you tidied up after yourself. We had a no shoes in the house rule, but I mean, if you forgot something inside and ran back in with your shoes, my parents wouldn't have flipped out. I feel like so many of these rules lead to dysfunctional behavior as an adult. I don't have many rules for my kids except for talk respectfully and keep a tidy house/room. Story 9. We were not allowed to lay on the bed and just read or be on the phone. Every time we did it, my father would come screaming and mocking us for being lazy or something else. When I was a teenager, I always listened for his footsteps in the hallway so I could get up quick enough and pretend to do something. Story 10. My dad used to come into our rooms after bedtime, and if he saw that we were awake, he'd yell, "Roll over, face the wall, and go to sleep." I always wondered why facing the wall was required. I realized as an adult that if we were facing the wall, We wouldn't see the strangers coming in and out of our house at all hours of the night. Story 11. Being alone, it was amazing except for a few times. I woke myself up for elementary school, put myself to sleep, which, to be fair, was around 2 a.m. because my parents came back after that, which is why they couldn't wake me up. Honestly, I loved it. The times my mom stayed home being sick are the worst moments of my childhood. Being locked outside in the snow, having to go to the shed and use boxes and bags to stay warm, or being locked in the collapsing, unfinished basement without any lights. Being alone was the best. Story 12. We were only allowed ginger ale if we were sick or on an airplane. It wasn't common, but we would occasionally get soda, but ginger ale was special, I guess. I was well into my 20s and had an epiphany one day that I'm a grown adult with my own money. I can just go buy a ginger ale if I want to. Story 13. We weren't allowed to walk around the house barefoot or in socks because my whole family thought that's basically inviting the flu and common cold into you. If we were ever walking around the house without shoes or house slippers on, we got yelled at. Huge cultural shock when I started meeting people in college that took their shoes off at the door. Story 14. My parents always shouted at each other, and their conversations were often filled with tension. When I was in college, I had a sleepover at my best friend's house. Everything felt so peaceful, especially when we were eating together. It was then that I realized my family sucks, and I had never experienced a truly peaceful environment with them. Story 15. As a youngling, you were supposed to be lower than grass and show desperate affection for whichever mature relative is willing to be in conversation with you. Treat them like gods. And if you were to make a slight misstep in your forced sycophancy, impulsively react like a normal kid, or God forbid say anything self-assertive, you better take the following 5 minutes to few months of passive-aggressive poutiness they diss at you to recover their ego with absolute submission. Also accept your failure as one of your strikes, which you get approximately 5, 15, depending on the person, spanning throughout your youth, before they cut off any remaining tolerance which they have convinced themselves is affection. Story 16. I love to bake. Half of the cookies I baked were immediately hidden in a box of broccoli in the basement freezer. My brother would otherwise come home and eat everything I made within an hour and leave nothing for the rest of the family. Related. I always made recipes with some having no icing or being less sweet than the rest. Pop was a type 1 diabetic, and I always wanted him to be able to have some too. Story 17. Mom was foreign and carried weird habits with her to America. Her slogan I heard a million times: no need. Can I get fries with my burger? No need. Can we go to the movies? No need. Can I get sprinkles on my ice cream cone? No need. Anything that required spending any money was a no need. Hell, if you had to pay for oxygen to live, Mom would probably still say, no need. Story 18. No locked doors ever. In fairness, it started as a safety thing when we were kids. When I was a toddler, I fell asleep behind a locked door and my parents thought I was dead because I wasn't responding. But when it carried into adulthood, it became about not letting us have boundaries or our own space. My mother assumed we were keeping horrible secrets or plotting against her if we locked a door. Heaven forbid if we just wanted an ounce of privacy. Story 19. My mom had a strict rule about me not being allowed to eat at anyone's house. She was convinced that if I accepted an invite for dinner, it would make it look like she couldn't afford to feed me. It just became my normal to say no if someone invited me to dinner. That was until I met the man who would be my ex-husband. His family kept inviting me over to dinner so that they could get to know me. I kept saying no. They thought I was rude. I finally explained why. That was when I realized that it wasn't normal. Story 20. The living room was for decorative purposes, not use. The dining table, the couch, the television, the carpet, and indoor mat. My mom was really obsessed with those home magazines and the reality shows of rich, lifeless people who always seemingly had a spotless home. Also, the hand towels in the kitchen and bathroom were not for use. Additionally, if you could just overall avoid walking on the carpet, just avoid it. But the house was mainly carpet. And honestly, if you could just not talk, think, or breathe, you were good, haha. But no, also, Christmas toys weren't to be all open. Only select few she allowed, the rest went into storage for collections. Don't know where any of them are, TBH. Never saw them again. The girls, me, had to clean and cook and take care of everything, including cleaning up and serving my brother's food while they gamed. I could probably keep going, but yeah, just normal. Story 21. Not being able to eat, make anything in the kitchen after dinner. After dinner was finished and the kitchen was cleaned, it was essentially closed. When I was younger, I had some friends over for a sleepover and they wanted to get a snack, and I told them the kitchen was closed, so we'd just have to wait until morning. They all looked at me like I was insane. They convinced me to sneak a bag of chips and I was panicking the entire time. Story 22. Bed had to be made perfectly every morning before you left for school. Sheets with proper tuck corners, comforter folded correctly over the pillows. When I was in middle school, a friend suggested that just pulling the blanket over the pillows was sufficient because technically the bed was made. I got grounded for a week for knowing better and not doing it the right way. I could only have vetted friends inside the house. Turns out not everyone leaves unsecured firearms where children can access them, and it was easier just to let me have only one friend. Assume that any weapon is loaded because they were. Not everyone keeps a rifle next to the laundry hamper in the hallway. When I was young, nap time in my room with the door shut. Until I left home, in bed promptly at bedtime. In neither case did they care whether I slept as long as I was quiet and stayed in bed. I learned to read to myself at age 3 and would often stay up half the night reading. Therapy's been great, thanks. Story 23. My brother was treated like a king, and I was treated like a slave because I was born with a vagina. It was normalized by adults BC. What were we, as female children, going to do about it? Nothing but get beaten punished. I knew my mother's relationship with my brother was weird ASF, but was also normalized by boy moms. He's an absolute POS too, my brother. Good job, boy moms. The femicide rate is through the roof and males are raving psychopaths. How proud you must be. For the not my son crowd, I wasn't typing to you, scroll your business. Story 24. There were no rules except never touch outlets or hot stoves. I found out what was okay on a case-by-case basis. Okay and not okay could change based on how either of my parents were feeling that day. What was okay with one parent might not be okay with the other. When I went to other kids' houses and to school, I found out about rules, which seemed kind of arbitrary. Eventually, I figured out that having rules helped avoid stressful conversations and yelling. When I grew up, my kids had rules, just not lots of them, and all of them explained. Story 25. We had a few. We had school clothes and house clothes. We had to change into our house clothes as soon as we got home from school. This was to protect our clothes and make sure they lasted longer. Grew up in a pretty poor family, so makes sense. Just thought it was normal, but none of my friends had to do it. Stepdad would require us to say hi or acknowledge him anytime he walked in the room. Often met with no response or a scowl, but if we didn't do it, my mom would get an earful about how disrespectful we were. Stepdad worked third shift and his bedroom was in the basement of our bi-level house. Had to tiptoe around when we got home from school. If we woke him up, he would come up and start yelling. My best friend lived on our street, and in the summer, I basically lived with her. She had a swimming pool, so we would be outside all the time. My stepdad would tell me I wasn't allowed to stay the night because I was going to overstay my welcome. But my best friend's parents did not mind at all, and often asked me to stay. Probably because they knew my home life was so chaotic. LOL. Story 26. No drinks before dinner. 1 piece of candy a day, 1 can of soda a day. My mom had a few select channels on TV we were actually allowed to watch. No Cartoon Network, no Nickelodeon, only certain shows on Disney and ABC. I grew up in the MTV era when it was huge back in the early 2000s, and I missed out on so much. My husband is always like, "You never saw that?" I missed out on so many classic movies and TV shows. My parents had a lot of rules growing up, but I think this has affected me the most. Story 27. My mom put the peanut butter in the fridge. I was an adult before I knew better. Also, we never had a toaster my entire childhood. I don't think my parents got one until I was like 25, 27. Toaster oven only. As for actual rules, IDK, I got nothing really. We didn't even have a lot of rules, period. Edit. Oh, I remember a couple. No television in your bedroom until 16, and even then it was very small and not something my parents were thrilled about. My daughter is 15, and this rule still stands for her too, although it's lost most of its meaning with tech and laptops. Also, no eating upstairs unless it was for special occasions like a sleepover or something, and then going back to the TV thing, you'd only be in the playroom, not the bedroom. I don't think that's uncommon, but maybe it is. Story 28. No hats at the dinner table, which we all needed to join to discuss our day, no matter what else was going on. I realize it was normal in earlier times, but growing up in the 90s, nobody else had that rule, and my mother would get irrationally offended if a friend came over and sat down wearing a hat. She'd stand in silence, fuming and refusing to put out any food until one of us whispered or made a motion, couldn't just say it out loud for some reason, and they removed it. Also, if the house phone rang while we ate, we weren't allowed to answer because if it's important, they'll call back. When I asked out of genuine curiosity at what point we'd pick up if they did in fact call back to see if it's an emergency, I was disciplined for talking back. My kids run feral while eating anywhere in the house as a direct result of this, and they're fine. Story 29. No glass drinking glasses. Don't get me wrong, we had a bunch, but we weren't allowed to use them, any of us, except my dad. He told me that one of us would drop one and wouldn't clean it up. Then he'd cut his foot and die. Is that what we wanted? At 24, I came home from another state, and I asked if the rule still existed. He said yes, so I took all the glasses back to North Carolina with me. Now, all that said, I am 33 and he's passed on. I was helping my mom out recently and she dropped a glass and didn't clean it up well, so maybe he had a point about our family in particular. Story 30 wasn't allowed to say someone was lying because lie was a bad word. Had to say you're telling a story. Also, shut up, be quiet. Penis, pokey, vagina, Vianya or cooter, crap, frick, flip, shoot, darn, fudge, dang, and bye were straight up no's. Bye was rude, had to end calls and conversations with goodbye or I love you. As an adult now, my mother has quite the problem with me because, and I quote, those were words for adults. I'm adult, so bitch is not policing how I speak or the words I use. Story 31. We had to live with a family member for a time, and her rule was the only drink you could have with dinner was milk. Gross. At my house, we had tons of ridiculous rules, but the one others are most horrified by is we were only allowed like 2 baths a week. Family of 6 and only 1 bathroom. Stepfather claimed this saved on water. He smoked, so us kids always smelled disgusting. I did sports and didn't get extra baths. If us girls had our period, no extra baths either. Story 32. My brother and I were never really allowed in my parents' room, except to get physical punishment. I thought it was normal. When I went to my friend's house when we were like 17, she went into her mom's room and told me to come, and I was like, no, we're going to get in trouble. She looked confused. I later found out it's just my parents, not anyone else's. Story 33. A place for everything and everything in its place. I have cleaning OCD because of this. The food in the cabinets and fridge, the labels, all have to be front-facing, uniform, and categorized. Clothes are color-coded, separated by season and type. Anything in the linen closet or drawers is uniformly folded SIMH. It's a strange habit, but if I leave stuff wherever, it makes me nervous. Story 34. My mother is schizophrenic and very weird. She had tons of rules like that. One weird one was that she would never seem to go to restroom and would always hold in her pee. I asked her before I showered. We had 3 restrooms, but one was a half bath, the other functioned in the shower leak, if she needed to go, and she would always say no to me and to just go ahead and shower. She then banged on the locked door and told me that I had to get out, mid-shower, because she had to go. I was told that I was to stand with shampoo in my hair, soaking wet in the hallway, with a towel wrapped around me so that she could pee or poop. This actually happened several times, and she would flat out refuse to go before I showered. Her excuse was that it was too inconvenient for her to go upstairs to the second bathroom. I asked her how she didn't see what she was asking me to do was inconvenient, and she just assured me it wasn't. I eventually told her to go to hell over it. Also, our AC broke, and it was about 90 degrees upstairs. She told me I wasn't allowed to come downstairs except to leave or eat, and I had to stay up there. I told her to go to hell once again. Story 35. No music in the car if Dad is in the car, so we would sing camp songs in the back seat quietly. We weren't allowed to wear jeans. We could wear pants, but not jeans. I went to private school with a very strict dress code, so this wasn't a big deal to me, but my older sister went to public school, and it was a huge deal for her. My mother bought us beautiful clothes, so looking back, I see what my parents were trying to do, but back then it was awful for my sister. Story 36. Nobody was allowed to make themselves something to eat or have a snack, and if you did ask for a sandwich, it was usually met with no wait for your tea. I'm not saying we were starved or malnourished, far from it, but I had to allow myself when I left home to eat snacks. Can you imagine my sister when she moved to America in the early 90s and had kids, and the culture there is accepted that anyone can just help themselves to anything in your fridge, etc. at any time? Blew her mind. Story 37. We had a 5-minute phone limit enforced by my dad. If you went over, he'd unplug the phone on you. He'd also do this to my mom. His reasoning? Phones are tools, not toys, and women speak too much. I honestly thought this was a thing. And when I was little, being the youngest, he'd make me run around and yell at my mom and sisters, 5-minute alert, 5-minute alert. The worst part was that while it was serious, he also thought it was hilarious and got joy out of unplugging the phone on us mid-conversation. Story 38. Your car keys went in the bowl by the front door. If you were in the house, your keys had to be there. If Dad needed to move a car and its keys were not in the bowl, you lost driving privileges for a month. Also, every car key had to have a house key on the same ring. I was surprised how much time people actually spend trying to find their keys all the time. Story 39. A few of my dad's rules when I was growing up. If you're listening to music, you must be wearing headphones. This rule did not apply to the adults. On the plus side, we all had TVs in our bedrooms because my dad never wanted to be subjected to listening to a program that wasn't of his choosing. If we were ordering pizza and the coupon said something like, up to 3 toppings, we had to get 3 toppings. You only wanted pepperoni? Too bad. You have to add 2 more toppings to max out on toppings. Forget about a plain cheese pizza. If we were told to be ready to go somewhere by a certain time, that really meant you need to be ready 10 minutes before said time. So if we were told to be ready to go at noon, you had better be ready at 11:50. Story 40. Not my house, but one of my friends. There were 4 kids and they lived with their mom. They were my neighbors. Their mom wouldn't let them go trick-or-treating because it was celebrating the devil. They were only allowed to watch Veggies Tales. They'd come to my house to watch The Simpsons and other shows. When we were teenagers, their mom saw I had piercings, and she told me piercings and tattoos were for sluts and hookers. Story 41, not mine, but a dying Apache friend's. When the doorbell rings, the kids hide. My friend and her mother grew up thinking that was just a fun game. Then her mother found out that it was because her grandparents were hiding the kids that hadn't been taken to a mission school. Her grandparents told their kids that it was a game so that they wouldn't be scared. Story 42. Be quiet when the batter is rising or it'll collapse. I firmly believe that one day a year that my mom baked Oli Bolin was the only day a year she got actual peace and quiet for a few hours with 4 kids at home, of which 2 are ADHD. We really wanted Oli Bolin, so we tried our absolute best to be quiet. Story 43. My dad wouldn't eat Chinese food for dinner, only lunch, so we'd never do Chinese takeout for dinner. Growing up, we weren't allowed to lock the bathroom doors when we were in there. My mom would worry that if there was an emergency, she wouldn't be able to get to us. Usually in my house, we'd only fully close the bathroom doors when we were in there. If it was open, it meant it was free, so we never had issues of someone walking in while you're doing your business. However, when I moved in with my now husband and other times in my life, people have walked in on me while on the can because I don't lock the door. It's just a force of habit now. If I'm at someone else's house, I will always lock the door, but in my house, I still don't, unless we have guests over who aren't my family and don't know that locks basically aren't used, and you need to knock check if someone is in there. Story 44. Do not make any noise when eating. This means chewing, utensils hitting the plate, bowl, drinking water. Yeah, apparently minimally chewing your food enough to swallow it without choking is physically bad for you. I'm 34 now and have all sorts of thyroid and tummy issues. I also learned how to essentially take very small drinks, or if I took in too much water, I know how to kind of hold it in my mouth, sinus drain area, so I don't make a gulping noise. My dad has crazy misogyny issues with women making noise at the table. Story 45. No locked doors. Sometimes even no doors at all, LOL. Had my bedroom door taken away when I was around 10 because my mom didn't believe me when I told her that I was doing my homework, so she always wanted to keep an eye on me. When we were done studying, we had to go outside. Toys, with a few exceptions, were outside only too. The garden was for playing, the house for studying, sleeping, eating, and reading. Story 46. We weren't allowed to play video games except on holidays and on our birthday. There were 7 kids, and we did collectively get a little crazy with 4 or more brothers, rowdily playing Smash Bros. So my mom has said that it was because she didn't want us getting obsessed and out of control with it. Joke's on her. When we grew up, we had no good way of self-regulating, and all of us, without exception, had to overcome video game addiction. Story 47. Friends couldn't ask to come swim in our pool. When I was about 8 years old, we moved into a house that had a swimming pool. We'd never had one before, so it was pretty exciting. We were moving from a different town, so we didn't have any friends in the new town yet. On the day we moved in, I remember my mom telling us that we could invite people over to swim anytime we wanted. But if anybody asked us or made the suggestion that we should go swimming, we would have to say no. Her rationale was that she didn't want us getting used by kids who are only pretending to be our friends so they could use our swimming pool. This was never a problem with anything else, and my mom is usually a very sweet and generous person who wanted us to make friends and have a happy life. I don't think it actually stopped any of our friends from coming to swim in our pool, but I now realize that for the rest of my life it made me very deeply self-conscious about asking for anything from anyone in the fear of being seen as a user or fake friend. Story 48. You can't answer the door after washing your hair or getting up from a nap because you will get sick. You have to have an undershirt on and your jacket zip has to be all the way closed during winter, or else you'll get a cold. You can't go swimming until your last exam is over, or else you'll get sick and have to miss an exam. Our country has a Mediterranean climate. The chances of it being too cold to handle are slim to none. My mom has this fixation that if you get a little cold or wet, you'll get sick. You cannot go trick or treat or to sleepovers. My mom thought that we would get kidnapped or raped. I get the concern, but we would ask to go in groups of very trusted friends with no big brothers or creepy dads. My friends went to sleepovers all the time. We weren't allowed to have sleepovers at ours either because my mom didn't want to be responsible for other people's children. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends alone until the age of 15, again because my mom thought I would get kidnapped. I couldn't be braless or wear gym shorts around the house because men, well, weren't allowed to buy a school bag from one certain brand because, according to my mom, their products were used in satanic rituals. We weren't allowed to go outside if it got a little windy because my mom was sure a balcony or a tree would fall on us and kill us. We weren't allowed to put anything on the coffee table or walk in front of the gas heater while it was on because my mom was sure someone or something would catch on fire. My mom has recently revealed to me that she was diagnosed with OCD years ago. So now most of these fixations make sense, but it led me to live in a bubble. When I explain my childhood to friends, they always give me that pity look because I missed out on a lot of experiences like camping, hiking, concerts, going on vacations in other countries, abseiling, walking in the rain, etc. I'm an adult now, and while I've been trying to introduce some adventure in my life, some of the fixations that my mom had got internalized in little me's brain, so I'm still learning how to let go of that bubble. So far, I've stayed in a cabin in a forest, walked in forests, even in the evenings while it was getting a bit dark, explored the mountains during winter, played with snow, and visited an abandoned village in the middle of nowhere, and got there by driving through very narrow roads on the edge of the mountains, went swimming in the cold sea, went on a road trip with my fiancé and friends, spotted a wild boar, and managed to slowly get to the car park without panicking, got lost in a park with a dead phone battery with fiancé after sunset, and found our way to the train station with no light and no technology. It's nothing special, but I finally feel like I'm experiencing life. I appreciate these moments even though they're anxiety-inducing. Story 49. My dad never answered our home phone. If it rang and our mom wasn't around, my brother or I had to answer it. There were times I remember being around my dad when the phone rang and him telling me to answer it. I remember asking my mom the reasoning behind it, and she said something about him encountering some really rude telemarketers. As an adult, I think it was actually bill collectors, and it made him not want to answer the phone. Another rule that seemed to only apply to me was I had a short list of career fields I could choose from to pursue, all STEM fields. But the one career that was off limits was nursing. I had a great aunt who I suppose hated her career as a nurse, and it was enough for my parents to jump on the bandwagon. Guess what I wanted to be? I'll never forget the conversation we had where they shut that down. They threatened to disown me and told me I'd have to find somewhere else to live if I pursued nursing as a career. Story 50. We grew up poor, and my dad wanted us to not tell other people about their jobs, middle school teacher and Amway MLM. I was asked by my peers in second grade what my parents did for work, and all I could say was my dad's a businessman. It was embarrassing because I wasn't allowed to say, and the other kids were all bragging that their parents were lawyers or doctors. I think there had been some scandal with one of their associates from Amway, and they didn't want it reflecting on them. How the hell did they think a second grade kid would judge them on that? Story 51. Not me, but a friend from middle school didn't realize it wasn't normal for your parents to cook for you almost every day. This poor kid drug up in a rundown meth house. If him or his brothers wanted to eat, they needed to go get it themselves and figure it out. Needless to say, he, along with my other friends, spent a lot of time at my house. Story 52. These are very specific. My mom made me hide any sugary snacks that she bought me. I used to hide my snacks for school, field trips under my bed or in the laundry room. My dad was a diabetic with zero self-control. All scissors must be put away before bed, and I wasn't allowed to use scissors in my bedroom. Someone might break in and stab us with the scissors while we're sleeping. Dysfunctional family, to say the least. Story 53. Ninja walking. I would get in a lot of trouble if I didn't walk around upstairs on our creaky wood floors silently. I had to know where the creakiest spots were so I could avoid them, and I never stepped down heel first. To this day, it stands out to me and makes me nervous when someone walks around normally on a creaky wood floor. I keep it to myself, though. What's the least embarrassing way to respond to, "So what do you do for a living?" when you've been unemployed for a decent amount of time? Story 1. The actual issue is the question. During my training, I did ministry in a highly transitory area of a city. I quickly learned to ask, what roles do you have in life? Not everyone has a job, but everyone is somebody to someone. Being able to say, I'm auntie to 5 children, or I play drums by the stadium, restores the dignity that question diminishes. If you have a job, great. If you don't, you are still valuable. If you don't want to identify by your work, maybe best of all. Story 2, I'm going to throw this in the mix too. If a potential employer asks about being unemployed, I simply say I was given an opportunity to take time off, but I'm excited to begin working again. I'll throw in some positive antidotes/stories/accomplishments during my period off, so they know I was being productive. Just my 2 cents. That can be a sticky question. If regular people are asking, I'll just tell them the truth. I left my last job because it sucked. It did. And I've been off since, going on 3 months. Not everyone needs to hear the entire story if you're not comfortable revealing the circumstances. Story 3. Absolutely nothing. Own it. It's only embarrassing if you try to play it up and sugarcoat it. Or in other words, if you make it sound like you're embarrassed about it. People have gaps between jobs, and sometimes those gaps are long. No shame in that. Anyone who judges you for that probably isn't worth talking to anyway. Story 4. Just say it. Tell the truth. Don't be embarrassed. I didn't work for a whole year so I could ski 80 days and spend time with my parents. Not embarrassed at all. Unemployment happens all the time. If you're doing something worthwhile in that phase, you won't be embarrassed. If you're not doing anything, you are wasting time and should work on that. Not on the lie or something witty you need to tell people. If you say it with confidence, it can help open doors. Story 5. You see. Nah! People that usually ask that are knobheads. So even if I have a job, I always say nothing, just chilling. You? And I have pretty decent one too, but I'm not about my job. I'm a human, and that is not anyone's business. There's no shame in not having a job. We have all been there. All the best, pal. I hope you find something somewhere that you like doing. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are as a human. Story 6. Tell them the type of work you are looking for if you are looking for the work you have done. E.g., my expertise is in management analysis for healthcare, or I'm exploring roles in product management in mid to large-size software companies. It might help you look. Maybe they have a connection. Story 7. Lately I say, I'm currently job hunting, but I need to put some ducks in a row before I can commit. It's a little harder when I have to talk to a government agency, like I got called for jury duty. See, I'm not really living there. It's just where my mail is delivered. I'm actually staying with family a few hours away from there, and then I have a rental lined up for next month. Story 8. Best thing I started doing was just not answering that question, politely explaining that my job is the smallest part of my life that I only do to survive under capitalism, and then explain my favorite hobbies and interests instead, while also asking about theirs. I've had a pretty high success rate. Most people only ask what you do for work because it's the default small talk icebreaker. If you're honest with someone and just try to have a fun conversation, it usually works well. Story 9. I would say I am a man of leisure. If they come back with how you got to be a man of leisure, I would say making money. How did I make my money? It was at the business factory. I find that some people that push hard on, what do you do, are trying to size me up to see how much respect to give me. Story 10. I tell them what field I'm in. So what do you do for a living? Well, primarily I am a writer. That said, I've spent several years in the medical field as an EMS dispatcher. I like the fast pace and good pay. You hear some interesting things, and then I pivot to interesting work stories without ever letting on that I've been writing website copy and short stories for the last 3 years and haven't had an hourly pay day gig in a while. Story 11. Living the dream. I'm taking a creative sabbatical. I'm taking a leave of absence to care for family. I'm working on major career development. I'm finally getting the degree I promised myself. I can afford to take an extended career break. Or even better, ask them back, what would you do if you could take a year off? After all, some people love talking about themselves most.